Have you ever felt like you're carrying an invisible weight on your shoulders? One that seems impossible to shake off no matter how hard you try? Maybe it's anxiety, guilt, or sadness that just won't go away. Or perhaps you're trapped in a cycle of frustration, constantly repeating self-destructive behaviors. What if I told you that the key to breaking free from these emotional chains lies within you, not in the outside world? Welcome to a course like no other. No fluff, no gimmicks, just a deep dive into some of the most powerful psychological concepts from K.L. Gustavong's work. The goal? To help you truly master your emotions and become emotionally unshakable no matter what life throws your way. So who is this for? If you're dealing with anxiety, depression, feelings of guilt, anger, or grief, or any kind of psychological struggle, this course is for you. If you've ever felt stuck, constantly repeating unhealthy patterns, or like no matter what you do, you can't seem to gain control over your emotions, this content is exactly what you need. If you carry pain that you can't put into words but it weighs heavily on you each day, keep watching. By the end of this video, you'll understand your shadow, how it shapes your emotions, thoughts, and actions, and why so many of the feelings you can't control, whether it's outbursts of anger, anxiety attacks, or unexplained sadness, don't come from what's happening around you but from unresolved issues deep within yourself. This isn't just another positive thinking method that only scratches the surface. We're diving deep into a transformative approach based on over a century of psychological research. You'll learn how to confront the hidden parts of your psyche, the parts that often control you without you even realizing it, and integrate them into your life. This isn't a video for passive consumption. Take your time, pause when needed, take notes, and don't hesitate to come back and re-watch. Each concept here can change the way you understand yourself and the world around you. But remember, the real power lies in applying this knowledge. It's not enough to simply watch. You need to actively engage with the material. This work will challenge you. It will push you out of your comfort zone. But on the other side of that discomfort is the emotional freedom you've been seeking. You'll discover why repressing your shadow is at the core of many psychological struggles, how the persona, the mask you wear in public, plays a part in your emotional fragility, and how the powerful archetypes in your unconscious shape your daily life. You'll learn how to take this knowledge and turn it into real practical action that leads to real change. This is not just a random video, it's a full course that lays the foundation for anyone looking to start or deepen their journey of self-discovery. The path that Carl Jung referred to as individuation, the journey to become the true, authentic you. So if you're ready to free yourself from the emotional suffering that's been holding you back, if you want to face life's toughest emotions without letting them destroy you, you've come to the right place. But remember, the real transformation only happens if you watch until the end and put the lessons into practice. You've got this. Now that you know what the shadow is, let's dive deeper into how it affects your emotions, thoughts, and decisions, often in ways that you don't even realize. The shadow is more than just a psychological theory. It's a powerful force that shapes your daily life. And if you don't recognize it, it will continue to control your actions and emotions, steering you in directions you might not want to go. Imagine this. Since you were a child, you've been taught what is good and acceptable by your parents, your school, and society. You were praised for being kind, obedient, and polite, while emotions like anger, jealousy, or sadness were frowned upon, even punished. So like most children, you learn to hide these negative emotions, pushing them deep into the corners of your mind. And that's where the shadow is born. But here's the truth. It doesn't disappear when you suppress it. Instead, it stays alive in your unconscious mind, quietly shaping your thoughts, reactions, and behaviors. The shadow consists of all the rejected, hidden parts of yourself. It's the side of you that you don't want to acknowledge, but it's also the side that controls much of your life from behind the scenes. Take a moment to think about it. Have you ever had an anxiety attack without knowing why? Or felt overwhelmed by anger or sadness with no clear cause? That's often the shadow at work, influencing your emotions and reactions in ways you can't see. It's not always obvious, but it's there, pulling the strings. The shadow isn't inherently evil. In fact, it holds aspects of your personality that, if integrated in a healthy way, could fuel creativity, strength, and emotional resilience. But if left unchecked, it operates independently, creating chaos in your life. You might find yourself stuck in destructive patterns, emotions and behaviors you can't control. It's like being trapped in an endless cycle of self-sabotage, repeating the same mistakes over and over without understanding why. Here's a hard truth to swallow. You are not just the version of yourself that you show to the world. You're not just your good side, the part of you that's polite and kind. You are also the side of you that you fear to confront, the side that holds anger, jealousy, selfishness, and fear. And the more you deny it, the weaker you become emotionally. But integrating the shadow isn't about striving for perfection. It's about becoming whole. It's about accepting that emotions like anger, fear, or envy are part of being human. By bringing these feelings into the light and acknowledging them, you can stop them from running your life from the shadows. In the next section, you'll start to recognize how the shadow is at work in your life, how it controls your emotions and decisions without you even noticing. If you think you're fully in control of your emotions, you might be in for a wake-up call. Because without understanding the shadow, emotional control remains out of reach. Now let's take a closer look at how the shadow impacts your emotions and choices. Jung believed that as long as we keep the unconscious hidden, it will continue to shape our lives in ways we don't realize, often calling it fate. This is the key to understanding why so many emotions seem to escape your control. From an early age, you were taught to repress certain feelings: anger, jealousy, fear, selfishness. You learn to hide what society deems unacceptable. But the thing is, what's repressed doesn't just vanish. It stays alive, festering with emotional energy, and continues to influence you through the shadow. Have you ever experienced anxiety that you couldn't explain? Or had an outburst of anger or sadness for no apparent reason? These emotions are often the result of unresolved shadow content. The shadow shapes your emotional responses, and when those repressed feelings surface, they can seem to come out of nowhere. Jung warned that repressed contents do not cease to exist. They become autonomous forces that can invade and dominate consciousness at any moment. This is why many of your emotional reactions seem to happen automatically. They're not random. They're responses driven by unconscious complexes, parts of your psyche that are controlled by the shadow. The shadow doesn't only affect your emotions, it influences your decisions too. You might find yourself repeating toxic patterns in relationships or making self-sabotaging choices in your career. These behaviors are all fueled by the unresolved content in your shadow. If you don't address it, the shadow will continue to dictate your actions and reinforce patterns that keep you stuck. As long as you believe you're fully in control of your emotions and decisions without first facing your shadow, you're living under an illusion. Ignoring your shadow doesn't make it disappear. In fact, it only strengthens its hold over you, lurking in the dark. The good news is there is a way out of this cycle, and it starts with awareness. Identifying the patterns of your shadow is the first step to taking back emotional control and becoming a truly resilient whole person. However, most people face a significant obstacle in starting this journey: the persona, the social mask you've created to fit in, please others, and protect yourself. Now, if you're still with me, you might be wondering, how can I actually apply all of this in my life? Because knowing something is one thing, but applying it, making it real, that's where transformation happens. And that's exactly why understanding the shadow and its role in your life is so critical. To understand how the shadow keeps its grip on your life, it's essential to look at the role of the persona. This persona is the mask you've built to survive and adapt to the world. It's the version of yourself you present to be accepted, respected, or loved. But here's the catch: it's not the real you. It's the version of you that you've learned to be, one that pleases others. Since childhood, you've been taught which behaviors get approval and which ones lead to punishment or rejection. Over time, you've learned to emphasize the acceptable traits and hide the ones that are considered ugly or undesirable. And this is where things get tricky. As the persona becomes more rigid, it pushes more and more of your true self into the shadows. The more perfect you try to appear on the outside, the more hidden aspects of your psyche accumulate in the dark. This is why people who appear flawless on the outside, always controlled, always positive, often struggle deeply in private with anxiety, depression, anger, or a sense of emptiness. The cost of maintaining an idealized persona is high, and the shadow doesn't let it go unnoticed. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung points out that the persona is a compromise with society but also a form of self-deception. The more you identify with this mask, the more disconnected you become from your true self, and the more vulnerable you are to the manipulations of the shadow. This internal conflict creates emotional fatigue. You waste energy trying to maintain an artificial image while the repressed aspects of your psyche demand your attention. It's a game you can never win. The shadow will always find a way to surface, whether through physical symptoms, emotional crises, or impulsive behaviors. So what's the solution? The first step is simple yet powerful. Start dismantling that mask. Recognize that you are not the persona you've created. You are a whole, complex human being with both light and shadow. Embracing both sides is the key to achieving real emotional freedom. But the journey doesn't stop there. To make this transformation a reality, you need to learn how to identify the elements of your shadow. How does it show up in your everyday life? How can you start noticing the hidden patterns that are controlling you without your knowledge? In the next section, we'll explore exactly how to spot the shadow in your daily life. As Jung said, the shadow reveals itself in moments of intense, irrational emotions, impulsive reactions, behavioral lapses, and projections onto others. You don't need to go searching for the shadow in dark caves or distant places. It's right there in your daily reactions, waiting to be seen. Now that you understand how the persona and the shadow work together, it's time to take a crucial step, recognizing the shadow in your daily life. Jung made it clear that the shadow often shows up when we are dominated by strong, irrational emotions. These are the moments when the shadow is in control. For example, when you experience an intense, unexplained emotional reaction to something or someone, when you snap out of frustration or suddenly feel overwhelmed by sadness, that's the shadow coming to the surface. Similarly, when you find yourself projecting your own feelings or insecurities onto others, that's another sign that the shadow is at work. These are just a few ways the shadow manifests in your life. By becoming more aware of these patterns, you can begin to reclaim control and stop the shadow from running the show. Let's talk about some real-life examples. Imagine you're at work and someone makes a comment or gestures in a way that triggers an overwhelming and disproportionate hatred or anger in you. You know that the reaction is excessive, but you can't control it. This is a classic sign of projection. What you're actually hating in that person is likely a repressed part of yourself that you refuse to accept. Here's another example. Maybe you find yourself judging people who show emotional vulnerability, calling them weak or dramatic. But if you take a moment to reflect, you might realize that you too have repressed your own sensitivity. You've hidden it out of fear of being seen as weak or vulnerable. What you condemn in others is often the very thing you cannot tolerate recognizing in yourself. These are just a few ways the shadow operates in our daily lives. The shadow can manifest as envy towards someone's success, excessive guilt for small mistakes, or even chronic procrastination. It can also show up when we avoid necessary confrontations or react impulsively without understanding why. All of these behaviors point to the presence of shadow material that's trying to be seen and integrated. In Man and His Symbols, Jung and his collaborators highlight that dreams are one of the most direct ways to access shadow content. Have you ever had a recurring dream where you're losing control, being chased, or facing confrontations with dark figures or aggressive animals? These kinds of dreams usually signal that repressed material from the shadow is trying to emerge into your conscious awareness. But dreams aren't the only clue. Pay attention to your body. Chronic tension, unexplained pain, and constant fatigue are often signs that emotional energy is being blocked by the attempt to keep these shadow aspects out of your awareness. Your body holds the unresolved emotional material that your mind tries to suppress. The first step to recognizing your shadow is honest self-observation. Ask yourself, what irrationally bothers me in others? What emotions seem to take over without my control? What behaviors do I feel ashamed of after they happen? What parts of myself do I hide to maintain my social image? This process requires courage. It's not easy to admit that you have anger, envy, fear, or cruelty within you. But until you recognize these elements, they will continue to control you from the shadows. The goal is not to judge yourself for these aspects, but to see them, understand them, and integrate them into your whole being. Recognizing the shadow is just the beginning. The real transformation begins when you consciously confront it. Jung made it clear that there is no way around this stage if you want to become a whole, integrated individual. He emphasized that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, cannot be achieved by denying the shadow. It requires confronting it with courage. So what does it mean to confront the shadow in practice? First, it's important to accept that this process will be uncomfortable. You don't get to choose whether you face the shadow. The only choice you have is whether you confront it consciously or continue to be manipulated by it. When you begin to bring these hidden aspects to light, intense emotional reactions often arise: guilt, shame, fear, anger. Many people give up at this point, retreating back into the safety of their persona. But this is where the real work happens. Let's look at a couple of practical examples. Maybe you notice that you feel a strong sense of envy when a colleague achieves success. Your initial impulse might be to deny it, brush it off, or justify it by thinking, "I don't care about that." But the true confrontation involves admitting that envy is present without judgment. Ask yourself, where does this envy come from? What does it reveal about my own unacknowledged frustrations or desires? Or perhaps you have chronic difficulty setting boundaries. In confronting your shadow, you realize that behind this pattern lies a deep fear of rejection and repressed anger from past experiences of being disrespected. Accepting that anger as legitimate is part of the process. Throughout this confrontation, you will go through several phases: denial, resistance, acceptance, and integration. First, you might deny or rationalize your dark aspects, minimizing them. Then feelings of guilt or shame may arise when you admit these parts of yourself. The next phase is acceptance, where you consciously recognize these traits as valid elements of your psyche. Finally, you begin the process of integration, where you gradually assimilate these parts, reducing their autonomous power. Jung emphasized that this journey is not linear. Confronting and integrating the shadow is a continuous process that lasts a lifetime. There is no final moment when you defeat the shadow. Rather, it's a lifelong commitment to engaging with and integrating these hidden aspects of yourself. To assist in this process, there are several practical tools you can use, such as dream analysis, reflective writing, Jungian psychotherapy, deep meditation, and above all, an honest willingness to face yourself with brutal honesty. As you progress in confronting your shadow, something inevitable happens. Deep archetypes from the collective unconscious begin to emerge. These archetypes, like the anima, animus, self, and trickster, play a crucial role in the shadow integration process. They can both accelerate and hinder your progress, and understanding their influence is key to navigating the journey of shadow work. In the next part, we'll explore how these archetypes influence your journey and how to work with them as you continue to confront your shadow. Jung dedicated a significant portion of his work to understanding archetypes, universal patterns of behavior and symbolic imagery that live within the collective unconscious. He described archetypes as inherited psychic systems that serve as organizing structures of experience. These archetypes are key to understanding the shadow and the individuation process. During the confrontation with the shadow, 4 archetypes often emerge with particular strength: anima, animus, self, and trickster. Each plays a unique role in your journey, sometimes guiding you, other times serving as obstacles. The anima and animus are the unconscious feminine and masculine aspects within men and women, respectively. They serve as intermediaries between the conscious and unconscious, playing an essential role in the shadow integration process. These archetypes typically appear in dreams, emotional projections, and relationships. For example, a man undergoing individuation might experience recurring dreams featuring mysterious, seductive, dangerous, or wise feminine figures. These figures represent an invitation to integrate repressed emotional aspects of himself. Similarly, a woman may encounter masculine figures in her dreams, whether they are dominating or inspiring, representing aspects of her animus that need to be brought to consciousness. The self-archetype represents the totality of the psyche and serves as the organizing center that transcends the ego. When the self emerges, it creates a strong urge to reconcile internal polarities. However, this process also brings the confrontation of everything that has been denied, demanding balance and integration. For instance, after months of working with the shadow, you may begin to feel a sense of internal unity and coherence. But this newfound sense of wholeness may be accompanied by deep existential questions about purpose, values, and identity, issues that the self forces you to confront in order to reorient your life. The trickster is one of the most deceptive and treacherous archetypes in the individuation process. It represents chaos, deception, and rule-breaking. The trickster often appears when you believe you have successfully integrated parts of your shadow, testing your ego and creating emotional traps. For example, after making significant progress in your shadow work, you might begin to think of yourself as more enlightened or self-aware than others. Ironically, this could be a sign that the trickster is at play, inflating your ego and creating illusions of superiority. This false sense of awakening can obscure the true work that still lies ahead. In Ion, Jung emphasizes that archetypes are not just contents of consciousness, but forces that organize and structure the psyche. Understanding their presence and role is crucial to navigating the individuation process with clarity. The journey of shadow integration is not linear or simple. With each step, these archetypes, whether as guides or obstacles, emerge to shape your transformation. After everything you've seen so far, you may be asking, why go through all of this work to integrate the shadow? The answer is straightforward, because the result is a profound transformation in your emotional intelligence and your ability to navigate life's challenges. Jung made it clear in The Undiscovered Self that no transformation of consciousness can occur without addressing the unconscious, particularly the shadow. In other words, true emotional maturity is impossible without confronting and integrating your shadow. Let's consider a practical example. Imagine someone who has struggled with anger throughout their life. After integrating the shadow, this person doesn't become passive or indifferent. Instead, they begin to recognize anger as a legitimate emotion and learn how to express it consciously and proportionately. This process of integration makes them emotionally stronger, more whole. Another example, someone with social anxiety who avoids social situations out of fear of judgment. Through shadow work, they gradually confront and integrate the insecurities and need for approval that once controlled them. As they integrate their shadow, they find themselves becoming more confident and able to engage in social situations with a new sense of self-assurance. These examples illustrate a critical point. Integrating the shadow allows you to reclaim parts of your psyche that were once dissociated. It frees up psychic energy that was previously consumed by repression. The result is a more authentic you, acting in ways that are congruent with who you truly are. Rather than trying to maintain a facade, you become more emotionally resilient. Intense emotions no longer dominate you because you recognize them as legitimate parts of your being. You're less reactive because you've stopped projecting your own issues onto others, and most importantly, you become more whole, accepting yourself as a complete human being with both light and shadow. This acceptance generates a profound sense of inner peace. As Jung said in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, the acceptance of the dark side of oneself strengthens the individual as they begin to relate more honestly and consciously to life. People who reach a deep level of shadow integration become emotionally unshakable, not because they no longer experience difficult emotions, but because they no longer let those emotions control them. They possess a sense of presence and stability that is rare in today's world, where most people are still running from their own shadows. But how do you apply this awareness in your everyday life? How can you train your perception to keep the shadow integrated without slipping back into old, unconscious patterns? This is what we'll focus on in this section: practical applications for maintaining constant self-awareness and integrating the shadow into daily life. Integration is not a one-time event. There is no finish line where you can say, "I'm done." Instead, integration is a continuous process, and the real challenge is maintaining awareness in your daily life. So, how do you stay aware of your shadow as you move through each day? Here are some practical steps you can take. The first step is to cultivate a posture of constant self-observation. Jung wrote, "What is not brought to consciousness continues to happen as fate." In other words, if you don't actively train your perception to recognize shadow content, it will continue to manifest in your life unconsciously, controlling your emotions and decisions. Pay attention to moments of irritation, envy, fear, or self-sabotage. These are the times when your shadow is trying to emerge. With awareness, you can begin to catch these moments and reflect on them consciously rather than being controlled by them. Practical shadow integration techniques. Conscious internal dialogue. Start by paying attention to your automatic reactions when you feel strong emotions like anger, envy, or shame. Instead of pushing them away, engage in an internal dialogue with them. Ask yourself, and what is this emotion trying to show me about myself? This process helps you integrate those emotions rather than repress them. Reflective writing. Set aside a few minutes each day to write about situations that triggered intense emotional reactions. Writing helps create a safe space to examine these emotions, reducing their unconscious power. By reflecting on these moments, you can better understand where they stem from and how to work through them. Dream analysis. Jung believed that dreams are a direct gateway to the unconscious. Keep a dream journal and pay attention to recurring images, symbols, or characters that evoke strong emotions. These symbols often represent shadow content trying to come to light. By analyzing your dreams, you can gain insight into parts of yourself that need integration. Mindfulness. Mindfulness practices help you develop present moment awareness. This creates space between impulse and reaction, allowing you to observe your patterns without identifying with them. With mindfulness, you can maintain a calm presence, even when the shadow tries to take control. Working with relationships. Use your relationships as a laboratory for shadow integration. When you feel a strong dislike, blind admiration, or moral judgment towards someone, investigate it. Does this reveal something you don't accept in yourself? Our interactions with others often bring out the parts of us we least want to see. Establishing boundaries. Learning to say no and set healthy boundaries is crucial for integrating the shadow. Many shadow issues arise when you violate your own boundaries in an attempt to please others or fit in. By setting clear limits, you protect your authentic self and prevent shadow material from festering. Periodic review of the persona. Periodically ask yourself, what parts of me am I hiding behind my current persona? Reflect on the aspects of your identity you're sacrificing in order to maintain your social image. This practice helps you stay grounded in your true self and not fall back into the trap of living behind a mask. Adopting these practices doesn't mean you'll never be caught off guard by shadow content again. It simply means that when it does arise, you'll be better equipped to handle it consciously, rather than being overwhelmed by it. With each cycle of awareness, the shadow's power over you diminishes. Your emotional intelligence strengthens. You become more authentic, whole, and free. However, it's important to remember that this is an ongoing journey. The shadow is cunning. It adapts and finds new ways to hide. Therefore, the work of integration is lifelong. But with each step you take, you grow stronger, more resilient, and more authentic. Now let's reflect on why mastering the shadow is a one-way path and why it's worth it. Once you start bringing to light the dark aspects of your psyche, those emotions you've avoided, the thoughts you've denied, and the impulses you've deemed unacceptable, you can no longer pretend they don't exist. The illusion that you're just a good person or someone who has overcome their weaknesses falls apart. What emerges isn't perfection, but a much more powerful truth, that of a whole human being capable of recognizing their own shadows. And because of that recognition, you become freer. Jung wrote in The Undiscovered Self, the function of the shadow is to compensate for the one-sided attitude of consciousness. Assimilating the shadow leads to a psychic balance that can't be achieved any other way. Without this work, you remain unbalanced, vulnerable to unconscious impulses that sabotage your life. Ignoring the shadow comes at a high price. You may try to live behind a persona, projecting your fears onto others, judging what you can't accept in yourself, and running from uncomfortable emotions. But the cost is ongoing psychological suffering, chronic anxiety, depression, compulsions, toxic relationships, and more. All of these things thrive in the darkness of the unintegrated shadow. On the other hand, those who face the shadow experience a profound transformation. You become emotionally resilient, less manipulable by others and by your own emotions. You begin to act with authenticity and integrity. You find inner peace that doesn't depend on external approval. You learn to use even the darker aspects of your psyche as sources of strength and creativity. But don't be fooled. This doesn't mean you're done once and for all. As Jung pointed out in ION, the integration of the shadow is an ongoing process that continues throughout life. New layers of shadow will emerge as you evolve, and the more you grow, the more capable you become of confronting these new layers with courage and maturity. This is not a path for the faint-hearted. It's for those who want to live consciously, for those who choose truth over comfort, for those who understand that emotional freedom is only possible when you accept all of your humanity, not just the parts you're proud of showing the world. Now I want you to make a commitment to this process. In the comments write, "I am willing to face my shadow." This simple declaration is a powerful first step toward affirming your intention to continue on this path of self-discovery and transformation. If this video resonated with you, don't stop here. Continue to the next video on the channel where we'll explore more about this transformative journey. The shadow does not disappear, but you can become greater than it. Now move forward. Move.